What is going on, everybody? So, the Nintendo Switch 2 is just around the corner, and I thought I would list 10 red flags that the Nintendo Switch 2 raises, just in the perspective of a new customer with this handheld, or someone who's just hearing about the Nintendo Switch 2 for the first time. I just wanted to let you guys know exactly all of the negative things about the Nintendo Switch 2 over the course of the last few months. So, number one is some game updates like Mario Odyssey will not have graphical or performance upgrades, but instead get HDR and game share support. Now that is very unfortunate because I was expecting a Nintendo Switch 2 edition version of something like Mario Odyssey, since it is a first-party title for the Switch 1. But it seems like we're not going to get graphical upgrades for Mario Odyssey, or maybe Nintendo doesn't think it could look any better, which in my opinion, that might be a possibility. But I would love to play that in 1080p in handheld mode, so I'm at least hoping that Nintendo Switch 1 games will naturally play at 1080p in handheld at least, please. Because on emulators on my handhelds, I'm able to play Mario Odyssey at 1080p, just saying. And number two is most physical Nintendo Switch 2 games are confirmed to come inside a game key card. And if you didn't know, game key cards are 2 GB cartridges that don't include the game inside of the cartridge, but instead a specific registration code that links up with your eShop account in order to download the game inside of your Nintendo Switch 2. And I know that sounds complicated because, well, it is. Nintendo is doing this to find some kind of middle ground between downloadable games and physical games. But instead of finding a proper and positive middle ground, they're choosing to go with the worst of both worlds. Because we can't just play the game on our Nintendo Switch 2 system if we don't have that cartridge inside, and we don't have the complete game on the cartridge. So what's the point of a quote-unquote physical game key card? It's mainly to resell the game. And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, you can just resell, like GameStop employees that are also going to push pro memberships on you belligerently. But don't listen to those GameStop employees because they don't know what they're talking about. Most likely the game that you're going to buy physical is a game that you want to collect. And a lot of Nintendo Switch 1 owners love to collect physical games. So I don't really see anybody just picking up a physical game and then giving it right back or selling it. Most likely that would be what a little kid would do. But the kid can't sell that game keycard without their parent. So there's really no point in this, and you may as well just download the game directly. And I'm sure Nintendo's also doing this because express microSD cards are going to be a lot harder to come by. A lot of 1 TB versions of the express microSD card are unavailable online and sold out. So this could be a workaround until express microSD cards are more readily available. But of course, they're going to be available at places like GameStop and Best Buy as the Nintendo Switch version of them. And number three is Nintendo Switch 2 exclusives will most likely cost $80 if Nintendo feels like making it that expensive without proper reasoning. And it's pretty much what I said. Nintendo is going to make some games $80 just cause they feel like the value of that game or popularity is worth $80. I think 100% of people agree when I say that's a ridiculous reason to make a game $80. If you are going to make a game $80, at least have some kind of optional expansions, similar to how Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has that course expansion. And number four is Nintendo reserves the right to destroy your Nintendo Switch 2 or brick it if you tamper with your account or try to hack your Nintendo Switch 2 console in any way, shape, or form. And you heard that right. Nintendo reserves the right to brick your system if you do any kind of funny business with your account. And I'm hearing that this feature is exclusive to America. So I'm assuming a lot of Americans like to hack and emulate systems. But it could also be a retaliation due to the tariffs. Who knows? It could be anything, but I'm not sure why Nintendo is so aggressive when it comes to this. Maybe because social media in America specifically talks about emulation more than other countries. And number five is most Switch 2 games will be between 20 to 60 gigabytes, and the Nintendo Switch 2 console only includes 256 gigabytes of storage, which is only enough to hold 4 or 5 games. And I saw this coming since they announced the 256 gigabyte storage. A lot of people thought that Nintendo will decrease or compress their game sizes, but from day one, since there were so many games coming out, I was sure that Nintendo wouldn't do that or wouldn't have enough time because they were dealing with so many things with the press, tariffs, launch expectations, that most likely game storage would be our biggest problem day to day with the Nintendo Switch 2. And the reason I know this is because that was the problem with the Steam Deck 256 gigabytes. And Steam Deck also came with a 64 gigabyte, which filled up in probably just one day due to a lot of PC games being over 25 gigabytes. And the same story is happening with Nintendo Switch 2. Even Mario Kart World is over 25 gigabytes, which is very unfortunate. It would be nice if Nintendo counteracted this by shipping out 64 gigabyte cartridges, and if there are any updates, you can just install that directly into the cartridge, similar to how Mario Kart World is only 25 gigabytes and the cartridge itself is 64 gigabytes. So you can actually install your DLC into the cartridge if it's specific to that game. But of course, Nintendo isn't tech savvy enough to do this, so expect a lot of those big DLC files to either go in your SD card if they allow it, or your main storage and fill up pretty fast. As well as the updates to your Nintendo Switch 1 games. The Nintendo Switch 2 is using translation layers, so that means they will have to recompress the game with a file size of 3 to 9 gigabytes. So that means if you already have a lot of physical Nintendo Switch 1 games, you're most likely going to see that internal space fill up regardless if you have upgrades for it. And number 7 is game upgrades will vary in price from $10 to $20 depending on the game and content. So for example, if you have 10 games that need a $20 upgrade, that will set you back about $200 to get higher resolution and better performance potentially. But as we're seeing with Mario Odyssey, some games won't get graphical upgrades. But most likely if you're paying for the upgrade, it will come with better textures, resolution, and performance, if you're lucky. And number 8 is, even though games are advertised to run at 4K, most Switch 1 games converted to Switch 2 edition titles will only achieve a maximum resolution of 1440p, which is a slight step above 1080p. So third-party games like Cyberpunk 2077 won't have a chance to go to 4K, at least for now. And number 9 is the Mario Kart World Direct didn't state there will be future support for expansions for the title, even though it's one of the most expensive games on Switch 2. And in my opinion, an open world isn't enough of a justification, as newer games like Doom: The Dark Ages that plays at full 4K on your PlayStation 5 is $70. And finally, number 10 is, even though the Nintendo Switch 2 is a bit lighter than handhelds like Steam Deck and ROG Ally, it's still 1.18 pounds and is quite a large handheld. Some people that are jumping from the Switch 1 and especially the Switch Lite may think that is on the heavy side, but if you're jumping to the Nintendo Switch 2 from a PC handheld, you're most likely going to think it's a lot lighter and a lot more convenient to play because, wow, this thing is light in comparison to something like the Steam Deck LCD. And I have an extra red flag for you guys. The Nintendo Switch 2's battery is said to only last 2 to 6 hours depending on the game, which is actually a step down from even the original Nintendo Switch 1 model. Nintendo is known for longer lasting batteries, but 2 hours is surprisingly low, especially for them. Even handhelds like the ROG Ally X and Steam Deck can last a lot longer than that, and they've been out for a couple of years. So what do you guys think about these red flags? Are they enough to warrant holding off on buying a Nintendo Switch 2? Or are you still going to buy it because, well, those are the usual limitations with Nintendo and modern handhelds? Yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a good one. Later.